In the ancient days, before prophets walked the earth, there was a command spoken in the dark, a command that would shape the fate of nations. Og, the ancient spirit, called his son to him. Abyss, silent, massive, obedient. And Og said only this: go, wander, feed, become. Abyss did not want to leave. For the first time in his existence, he was not alone, but obedience was the only language he knew. So he walked into the wilderness. For years he wandered. 2, perhaps 3. Time meant nothing to him. Only hunger, only instinct, only the restless spirits that clung to him like shadows seeking a host. His footsteps blackened the soil. His presence bent the air. His hunger grew until it felt like a second heartbeat. And then, he found a village. Small, defenseless, unprepared for the storm that approached on 2 legs. The spirits hissed for blood. His hunger roared. But something flickered inside him. A spark of awareness. A whisper of strategy. He did not know if it was his own mind awakening or the Prince of Persia stirring within him. Abyss spared some, not out of mercy, not out of compassion, but because something in him understood. Some must live so I may remain. Those spared became the first laborers, the first hands that built fires, shelters, altars, the first to witness the birth of a kingdom they did not choose. Time passed, the village changed, the land twisted, the air thickened, the spirits multiplied, and then a caravan arrived. At its head walked a sorcerer, corrupted, trembling, guided by whispers not his own. The Prince of Persia had led him here. When he saw Abyss, he fell to his knees. He saw the spirits swirling, like a storm. He felt the ancient presence resting upon the silent creature. He recognized the blessing that once preserved Og after the flood, and the prince whispered to him, "This one is mine. Serve him and you serve me." The sorcerer became the first high priest, not a manipulator, not a tyrant, but a believer. He discovered the power of Abyss's blood, a power that corrupted land, soured wells, and marked warriors. He used it sparingly, wisely, reverently. He built rituals. He built doctrine. He built order round the chaos, and the town grew. The godless began to rive, drawn by a pull they could not name. The broken, the violent, the exiled, the spiritually empty. They came in caravans, in families, in ones and twos, drawn by a hunger that matched their own. Abyss never called them, but they came anyway. The high priest called it destiny. The house lords called it pilgrimage. The world called it madness. And the town became a sanctuary of shadows, a pilgrimage site for the damned. A year passed, and then a messenger came, sent by the true son, the brother Abyss once walked beside. He came with desperate news. The blood was failing. 3 chapters destroyed. A town of the living God rising in defiance. The clan collapsing. The true son needed Abyss. He expected loyalty. He expected kinship. He expected obedience. A hush fell over the temple when the messenger spoke. The spirits that clung to Abyss stilled as if listening for a verdict. The high priest's hands trembled on the censer. The house lords leaned forward, hungry for the promise of a solution. The messenger, ragged and urgent, expected the old answer: obedience, return, the power of kinship to be wielded again. He expected Abyss to rise and go. Instead, Abyss rose from his throne of shadow and moved with a weight that made the stones remember their place. The spirits froze. The high priest bowed. The house lords fell silent, and Abyss spoke, one of the few times he chose to speak. His voice was not loud. It was the sound of something immense deciding. I have found my home. I have found my name, my purpose. True son, I don't need. The messenger's hope cracked like thin ice. He had not come to bury a brother. He had come to call a power back into the world. He realized, in the slow, terrible way that truth arrives, that he was not pleading with a brother but addressing a new center of gravity. Abyss did not kill him. The house lords seized him, to end his life and to bind him as sacrificial proof. Proof that the old bonds could be broken and that the city would not be moved by appeals to kinship. The messenger was taken, his fate sealed by ritual and law, and the true son's cause, his authority, his covenant, his power, was left to wither in the face of a new order. This is the crucial distinction. The true son did not die in flesh. His life continued in the world beyond the temple. What was destroyed was his power, the sacred current that had once flowed through the clan, the authority that had bound people and spirits together under his name. The messenger never returned with the news that the true son's influence had been broken. 3 chapters of the old covenant were undone. The rights that sustained his authority had been corrupted or stolen, and the living town that rose in defiance had cut the veins through which that power had run. The true sun remained a figure in the hills and in the prayers of those who still remembered him. But his reach, his ability to command the spirits, to marshal the clan, had been severed when Og's spirit descended and recognized the alignment upon Abyss. The Prince of Persia's principality resting like a crown, Og's own ancient presence folding into the vessel. He did not bow in fear alone. He bowed in the recognition of inevitability. Abyss had become the place where three forces converged: flesh, ancient spirit, and principality. One body, three presences, one purpose. The world shifted because the current of power had rerouted. The true sun's light had not been extinguished. It had been outflanked. From that moment, Abyss's throne was not merely a seat of hunger, but a center of governance. The high priest codified rites that made the loss of the true sun's power legible. New scriptures that explained the change as destiny. New laws that replaced the old chapters. New ceremonies that bound people to the city rather than to the clan. The house lords enforced these laws with the same mixture of ritual and force that had built the city. The Prince of Persia whispered strategy into ears that had once listened only to kings. Og, patient and vast, held the balance between preservation and appetite. The city grew on the bones of that shift. Pilgrims came not because the true sun had called them, but because the city offered a different kind of promise, belonging to a power that demanded less of kinship and more of obedience. The high priest taught how to call the spirits without being consumed. The house lords taught how to trade fear for protection. The people learned to live under a god whose authority was not inherited, but constructed, whose power was not ancestral, but manufactured through ritual and blood. Yet the absence of the true sun's power left a wound that would not heal by decree. Where his authority had once woven communities together, now there were gaps, places where memory could take root. Those who remembered the old chapters felt the loss as a moral and spiritual vacancy. They did not all rise in arms. Many simply kept the old names alive in whispers, in lullabies, in the secret tending of wells. The true sun's influence persisted in these small resistances, in a midwife who named a child with an old name, in a shepherd who refused a mark, in a teacher who taught the old stories in the margins. Abyss watched these things with a curiosity that had nothing to do with doctrine. He had been sent to wander, to feed, to become. He had become a center that rewrote the map of power. The spirits that fed him adapted. Some grew bold and demanded expansion. Others thinned and sought new hosts. The high priest learned to balance hunger with governance. The house lords learned to turn fear into commerce. The Prince of Persia learned to use the city as a lever in courts beyond its walls. Og, ancient and inscrutable, remained the deep counterweight. The making of a false god, then, is not the literal extinguishing of an elder's life. It is the rerouting of authority. It is the moment when a current that once ran through a clan is diverted into a city. When a brother's covenant is replaced by a throne of shadow. The true sun's power, his ability to bind spirits and men under his name, was broken, not by death but by displacement. He remained a figure of memory and resistance. His followers kept his chapters alive in secret. But the world's axis had shifted. In the years that followed, the city's reach spread like a stain. Ritual became law. Law became faith. Faith became currency. The high priest taught the rites in low, measured tones. The house lords traded protection for obedience. The Prince of Persia whispered counsel that turned neighbors into vassals. Og watched, patient and vast, as the new order consolidated. And yet memory persisted. Small acts of refusal, naming a child, tending a well, singing an old song, became the slow work of reclaiming what had been lost. The true sun's power, though broken, lived on in those acts. The city did not fall in a day. It withered in seasons. The throne of shadow remained, but it no longer held the uncontested claim it once seemed to promise. The camera pulls back now from the carved stones and the empty throne, from the wells that have been tended and the fields that have been replanted. In the distance, a child hums an old song as she walks past a ruined altar. Her voice is small, but it carries. The wind moves through the grass like a hand turning a page. The world keeps its stories, and the stories keep the world. Abyss, the making of a false god, not the death of a brother, but the breaking of a power, not the end of a life, but the rerouting of authority. A false god was made, and in being made he taught the living how to remember themselves again.